Picture this. You finish a long day of work, sit down on the couch, grab your controller, and power on your console. The room lights up with that familiar glow. Your favorite game loads in seconds. Everything feels fast, smooth, and powerful. But here's a question almost nobody asks. While you're gaming, how much electricity is that console actually using? And more importantly, which one is quietly pulling more power from your home? The PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X? Now at first, this might sound like a tiny detail, a few extra watts here, a few dollars there, but when you zoom out across millions of American households, things get interesting. Gaming consoles today are more powerful than some desktop PCs from just a few years ago. They run massive processors, high-end graphics chips, ultra-fast storage, and cooling systems designed to keep everything running smoothly for hours. All of that power requires power. And depending on which console you own, your electricity bill, and even the country's energy usage, might be affected more than you think. So today, we're diving deep. We're comparing the PS5 and Xbox Series X not by graphics, not by exclusives, but by something far less discussed: electricity. Which console actually uses more power? Which one costs more to run in the United States? And which one might secretly be costing gamers more money every year? Let's break it down. Gaming in America has never been bigger. Over 200 million Americans play video games in some form, and millions of households own at least one major console. The PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X launched as the most powerful consoles ever made, bringing true 4K gaming, ray tracing, lightning-fast load times, and experiences that look closer to Hollywood movies than traditional games. But that power comes with a cost: energy. And in the United States, electricity prices have been rising steadily in many states. According to national averages, Americans now pay around 15 to 17 cents per kilowatt hour, depending on location. In states like California, Massachusetts, and Hawaii, it can be much higher. That means devices that consume power daily, TVs, computers, and yes, gaming consoles, start to matter more. But the real reason this conversation is happening right now is because consoles have evolved. Older consoles like the PlayStation 2 or Xbox 360 were powerful for their time, but today's machines operate on a completely different level. Inside both the PS5 and Xbox Series X are custom processors built on technology similar to gaming PCs. They run advanced CPUs and GPUs simultaneously while streaming massive worlds, managing AI, rendering lighting effects, and handling high frame rates. In other words, your console is basically a gaming supercomputer sitting under your TV. And when millions of Americans power those machines every evening, the electricity adds up. So the question becomes, which console is actually more efficient, and which one might be quietly using more energy than gamers expect? To understand this, we first need to look inside these consoles. Both the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X use custom processors designed by AMD. Each one combines a CPU and GPU into a single chip, something called an APU. This chip is responsible for nearly everything your console does: graphics rendering, game physics, AI behavior, world simulation, and more. Think of it as the engine of the console. Now, both systems target similar performance. They aim for 4K gaming, ray tracing, and smooth frame rates. But the way they achieve that power is slightly different. The Xbox Series X was built with raw performance in mind. Microsoft designed it with a slightly larger GPU configuration, allowing it to push more theoretical graphics power. On paper, the Series X has about 12 teraflops of GPU performance. The PlayStation 5 sits around 10.3 teraflops. That difference may not sound huge, but in engineering terms, it means that Xbox hardware is capable of pushing more raw graphical throughput. And here's where electricity enters the conversation. More performance potential usually means higher power demand, but it's not always that simple, because modern hardware also focuses heavily on efficiency. Both Sony and Microsoft designed their consoles with advanced cooling systems, power management software, and dynamic performance scaling. That means the console doesn't always run at maximum power. When you're watching Netflix or navigating menus, power consumption drops dramatically. But when you launch a massive 888 game with ray tracing and 4K textures, That's when the hardware really wakes up, and that's when electricity usage becomes noticeable. So let's talk real numbers. When the PlayStation 5 is running a modern game, it typically consumes somewhere around 200 watts of power, sometimes a little less depending on the game, sometimes slightly more during intense scenes. The Xbox Series X, meanwhile, tends to draw slightly more power during gameplay. In many measurements, it sits closer to around 210 to 220 watts while gaming. Now that difference might sound tiny, 10 or 20 watts doesn't feel like a big deal. But this is where things get interesting, because Americans don't just play games for 10 minutes. Average gaming sessions often last multiple hours. Many players game several days per week. And across an entire year, those small wattage differences start stacking up. But here's where it gets serious. Electricity usage isn't just about gaming sessions. There's another factor most people completely overlook: idle power. Idle power is the electricity a device uses even when it's not actively doing much. Think about when your console is sitting on the home screen, or when it's in standby mode downloading updates overnight. Both consoles support features like instant resume, background downloads, and quick startup. That convenience requires the system to stay partially active, and this is where efficiency design becomes extremely important. The PlayStation 5 standby mode is generally very low power. It can drop down to just a few watts depending on settings. The Xbox Series X has multiple standby modes. One option prioritizes energy savings and uses minimal electricity. Another option keeps the system ready for instant startup and background updates, which consumes more power. For gamers who leave their consoles in quick start mode all the time, that electricity can quietly accumulate throughout the year. And here's the part nobody talks about. Across millions of consoles in American homes, standby electricity usage can equal the power consumption of entire small cities. That's why energy efficiency in electronics has become a major conversation in the tech industry. Companies are now under pressure to build devices that deliver incredible performance without dramatically increasing national electricity demand. Because gaming isn't just entertainment anymore, it's a massive digital infrastructure. But electricity usage isn't only about the console hardware, it also depends heavily on what you're doing with it. For example, if you're playing a fast-paced game at 120 frames per second with ray tracing enabled, the console will push its hardware harder. That means more energy consumption. If you're playing a simpler indie game or watching streaming content, power usage drops significantly. Streaming video on a console typically uses much less electricity than active gaming, but compared to dedicated streaming devices, consoles still use more power overall. This is why some energy experts recommend using small streaming devices instead of consoles for everyday TV watching, because consoles are designed primarily for gaming performance. Everything else is secondary, and when you use a high-powered gaming machine to simply watch Netflix, you're technically using more electricity than necessary. Not a massive amount, but enough to matter over time. Now let's zoom out even further, because this isn't just about individual households, it's about the entire gaming ecosystem in the United States. Millions of PS5 and Xbox Series X consoles have been sold across North America. If each one averages even 200 watts during gameplay, that represents enormous cumulative energy demand. In fact, analysts have estimated that gaming consoles collectively use billions of kilowatt hours of electricity every year in the United States. And as graphics technology advances, that demand could continue rising. But companies are aware of this. Sony and Microsoft both participate in energy efficiency initiatives designed to reduce the environmental impact of gaming hardware. They optimize software updates, improve sleep modes, and work on more efficient chip designs with each new generation. Because while gamers want power, they also want responsible technology, and electricity costs matter more than ever, especially when energy bills fluctuate across the country. So which console actually uses more electricity? In most real-world gaming scenarios, the Xbox Series X tends to consume slightly more power than the PlayStation 5, but the difference is relatively small. We're usually talking about roughly 10 to 20 watts during active gameplay. That's about the power draw of a small LED light bulb. In terms of yearly cost for an American gamer, the difference might only be a few dollars depending on usage habits. So if you're choosing a console purely based on electricity, that probably shouldn't be the deciding factor. But it does highlight something fascinating. Modern gaming hardware is incredibly powerful, and balancing that power with efficiency is becoming one of the biggest challenges in consumer technology. Of course, there are two sides to this story. On one hand, today's consoles deliver unbelievable experiences: real-time ray tracing, near-instant loading, massive open worlds, all running smoothly from a box under your television. That level of performance used to require expensive gaming PCs drawing even more electricity. Consoles actually provide a relatively efficient way to access high-end gaming compared to some PC setups. But on the other hand, energy consumption still matters. As more households adopt powerful electronics, the combined demand on power grids increases. Some people worry about environmental impact, others worry about electricity costs, and some simply want technology that performs well without unnecessary waste. Public conversations around this topic often reflect those competing priorities. Some gamers argue that performance should always come first. Others believe efficiency should play a bigger role in hardware design. Both sides raise valid points, because the future of gaming will likely require both maximum performance and smarter energy management. So what does the future look like? By 2030, gaming hardware could look very different. Chip manufacturing processes are constantly improving, allowing companies to build processors that deliver more performance using less power. New architectures are being designed specifically to maximize efficiency. Cloud gaming may also change how electricity is used. Instead of every home running a powerful console, some processing could shift to large data centers optimized for energy efficiency. At the same time, graphics technologies like AI-assisted rendering may allow games to look better while using fewer hardware resources. All of these innovations point toward a future where gaming becomes both more powerful and more energy conscious. And for American gamers, that means faster games, better visuals, and hopefully lower electricity impact. So what should you actually do with all this information? If you're a student or someone on a tight budget, being mindful of standby settings can make a small but meaningful difference. Switching your console to energy-saving sleep modes when you're not using it helps reduce unnecessary electricity usage. For working professionals who game regularly, simply turning off the console instead of leaving it idle overnight can save energy over time. And for families with multiple devices in the house, using consoles primarily for gaming rather than everyday streaming can reduce total household electricity consumption. These are small habits, but small habits multiplied across millions of gamers can have a surprisingly large impact. At the end of the day, the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X are both incredible pieces of technology. They represent the cutting edge of console gaming. And while the Xbox Series X typically uses slightly more electricity during gameplay, the difference is small enough that most players will never notice it on their energy bill. What matters more is how we use these machines, because the real story isn't just about watts. It's about the future of technology, energy efficiency, and the way digital entertainment fits into everyday life. Gaming is only getting bigger, consoles are only getting more powerful, and the choices tech companies make today will shape how efficiently millions of people play tomorrow. So here's the question for you. Do you think future consoles should focus more on raw performance or energy efficiency? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden side of gaming technology, make sure you subscribe to Tech Vibes for more videos exploring the tech shaping our world, because sometimes the most interesting stories in technology aren't about what we see on the screen. They're about what's happening behind the power button.